Okay, so welcome to our first, second, third shear in the sequence. As we work our way through Sefer Ruth tonight, we are finishing up Perek Aleph, which would be astonishing to me that I am still on schedule. That's not always my best thing. Where we left off last night in Pasuk Yud Gimel was Naomi was extremely bitter and said so. Ki marli ma'od mikem al benosai, she said to her daughters-in-law, calling them her daughters, which is a nice touch. That now that either they are sticking with her after her sons have died, or because they have expressed interest in converting and becoming Jewish, so she calls them benosai last night. You are my daughters, but no, she tests them for the third time with the final shovna, turn around, and go back to Moab, because I am bitter. Ki marli ma'od mikem, I am very bitter for you, or else because of you. It could be that Naomi is tired of her Moabite daughters-in-law. She's embarrassed at bringing them home. They're the only people who are going to go home with her. We're going to see at the end of the parak when she gets home exactly how the people of Beis Lechem are going to treat them. None too well. She might be bitter, we said from some of the Mefarshim, because her sons married out, and as a result, that might be why they died, because they married non-Jewish women without ever converting them, without ever making them part of the faith. Ki yatz avi yad Hashem. But the strongest condemnation is that idea that the hand of God is against me. And so her bitterness has taken her to a place where I'm sure we can understand and empathize and maybe even identify with a lot of people today. When bad things happen, one feels that the universe is against them somehow. And because she is a woman of faith, she feels that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has turned against her. So she tries to push them back. She tries to send them back. This is the third time now. Vatisena kolan. So where we're going to start tonight, Pasuk Yud Daled. And tonight's shir, as always, the Ilui Nishmas Avi Mori Pesach David ben Abraham Nata, my father Peter Sokolow, the whole series dedicated to him. Vatisena kolon, vatifkena od. So they raised their voice and wept again. They broke into weeping again. It seems, as we've seen since Pasuk Tes, all the way back, where we said that they started to cry. Make sure I find my page. We said Vatisena kolon vativkena in Pasuk Tes, and now Vatisena kolon vativkena od. Same exact language. They had been weeping as they walked along, going along the road, until their strength failed them. But until this point, they've been unified. In Pasuk Yud, they said, Vatomarno la ki itachna shuv le'amech. They both said to her as one, we are going to return with you to your nation. But now something different happens. Before, they were unified in sticking with Naomi. Now, Vatishak Orpah lachamosa. After the final third pushing away, Orpah kisses her mother-in-law, and essentially, as we would say in English, kisses her goodbye. Virus davka ba. But Ruth cleaved to her, attached herself to her, became a devuka, became very much connected to Naomi and clung to her. Last night's shir, which I put up on YouTube, I've been finding there's a million portraits of Ruth, Naomi, Orpah. Everywhere you look, there's a Ruth art. And Marc Chagall did a series, which I will be using again. He did a series in 1960 of lithographs for some French magazines of the story of Ruth. And in that particular one called Naomi and Her Daughters-in-Law, it's Ruth and Orpah clinging to Naomi in the middle. But what's interesting about Chagall is that he adds a little interpretation. If you look at the portrait, and just look up Naomi and Her Daughters-in-Law on Google. I don't have a link with me right here. But Naomi's hands are down in the middle. The daughters-in-law are on either side, clinging to her. But Naomi doesn't embrace them. Naomi doesn't raise her arms around them. Naomi doesn't cling back. she keeps her hands like this, sealed off from the women who are trying to stick with her. And that's a really interesting concept, and we're going to see that in a minute as we go on later in the Psukim. Naomi, even after she doesn't reject Ruth anymore, is in a way still closed off from her because of the bitterness that she described in the previous pasuk. But now Orpah kisses her goodbye and turns around, but Ruth holds on. Now Orpah, as we said once before, she's walked 40 paces with her mother-in-law. That's what the Medrash tells us. And she was rewarded for the 40 steps that she took. But notice she doesn't wait for a parting kiss in return. It just as Orpah kissed her, not that she kissed Orpah back. Orpah just spun around and took off. Now, in the merit of the fact that she wept 4 times and walked 40 paces, she's going to have great warrior sons, the mightiest being Goliath, who's going to live 40 extra days after he should have. Goliath challenges the Jews. They're across on both sides of a valley, and Goliath shakes his fist up at Shaul and the Jewish army, and they're frightened to go down and challenge him. For 40 days, he blasphemes against God, and God does not strike him down until a young shepherd boy with a sling shows up, and that's David. So David's descendant, Ruth's descendant, is going to come up against Orpah's descendant when it's David and Goliath facing each other. And we all know who wins, spoiler alert. But in the meantime, Ruth is weeping sincerely but holds on. Her voice is raised. She is clinging to Naomi out of love. And Naomi says, Tesva vatomer hine shava yivimteich el amah. There's the word yibum again. It's interesting that the word yibum comes up several times before the actual act of yibum, of levirate marriage, is going to take place in Perek Dalet. But she says, your sister-in-law, your Yavama, has returned to her nation. That's a pretty perceptive thing for Naomi to say. She didn't return to your nation. She returned to her nation. Because by now she understands that Ruth is very sincere in wanting to become Jewish. So she returned to her nation, to her people, ve'el Eloheha, and to her gods as well, which is really what it comes down to. She's turned back and gone back to Avodah Zarah. Shuvi acharei yivimteich. Return after your sister-in-law. Rejoin her. You both spoke with one voice in Pasuk Yud. Why are you separating now? Why not just go back with her? So rejoin her. Naomi is urging Ruth one last time. Follow Orpah. Make a graceful departure. Shuvi acharei yivimteich, not necessarily to her gods. Naomi can't bring herself to say, go and be Moabite again. But at the same time, she says, turn back and go back. Now, Orpah, in fact, this is the last time we're going to see Orpah. Orpah didn't actually speak, except to say, together with Ruth, we will go with you. Chazal have kind of vicious words for Orpah. When she goes back home, she returns to the temptation of what her society is about. As we saw yesterday, Moab is stingy and Moab is licentious. Moab is the unfettered internet with no filter. Moab is everything gross that one could think of. And Orpah does all those things. The Talmud says that night she consorted with 100 men from among the Plishtim, among the Philistines. And one opinion says, Af Kelev Echad. And enough said about that. So she had a busy night. Unsavory connotations to her name, turning her oref, turning her back on people. And she woke up pregnant, not knowing who the father was. And that pregnancy would lead eventually to Goliath, a man with uncertain parentage and no known father. Orpah really goes back with a vengeance. Ruth, the exact opposite in every way. Vatomer Ruth, pasuk Tazayin, al tifki'i bi le'ozveich. Do not, tifki'i, pega means contact, but unwanted contact sometimes. In this case, it means don't urge me, don't push me, don't pressure me. La'ozveich, to leave you. La'shuv, me'acharoyich, to return from following after you. Don't try to convince me to leave you behind. And now the most famous words in the Megillah that we all know. Ki el asher telchi eleich. Wherever you go, I will go, says Ruth. Uva asher talini olin. and where you lodge and spend the night, I will lodge and spend the night. Amech ami, your people are my people. Velohayich Elohai, and your God is my God. Explicitly in that last line, Amech ami velohayich Elohai, she's rejecting Naomi saying, Shuvi el Amech ve'el Elohayich. She said, go back to your people and your gods. Ruth specifically says, I'm not going back to my people because your people are my people. And I'm not going back to what you're calling my gods because your God is my God. Wasn't that Herman Woke? Your God is my God. Oh, I don't remember the name of the book. For crying out loud, it's yeah. Unmute Judith. What was it, Judy? Oh, for crying out loud. I can't remember. It's in there somewhere in the trivia brain in the back of my head.
I don't remember.
Yeah, we'll get it later. I'm not going to Google it in the middle. That would be rude. So I'm going to stay with you, whether or not Naomi remarries. Because remember,
This is my God.
Say again?
The book was This is my God.
This is my God. And in a manner of speaking, Ruth pioneers that language. Your God is my God. This is my God. Which means, regardless of Naomi, she's converting because she finds something in Judaism to be so attractive and so wonderful and magnetic and so positive. In a world of deities and idol worship, the idea of a monotheistic God with a clear moral code, with things that are accepted and forbidden. My mom and I have been talking about this a lot lately, about lines. And lines you can't cross if you are a truly observant person who tries to fulfill God's commands of us and God's messages to us. And sorry, I just keep putting up in the chat the link to the Sefaria page if you want the psukim. She has no ulterior motives. Now, according to one version, all of this was a test of Giores. All of this was testing a convert, which we do. We are not a proselytizing people. We don't ask people to convert. We don't force them to convert. We don't say the cross or the sword or the scimitar or the turban, as the old language was in the Crusades. We try to convince you that you're giving up a lot to become Jewish. But according to this, all of these references are to halachos. Naomi taught Ruth about the malachos and limitations of Shabbos. And Ruth answers, El Asher Telchie Lech. Wherever you're allowed to walk on Shabbos, the Tchum Shabbos, that's where I'm going to go. Naomi taught her about rules of Yichud and Jewish morality around the opposite sex. So Ruth says, Uvasher Talini Olin. Wherever you're allowed to sleep, that's where I'm allowed to sleep. I'm a good Jewish girl now too. Naomi says, you have to fulfill 613 mitzvos. And Ruth says, Amech Ami. Your mitzvos of your people are my mitzvos of my people. We can't worship idols. She says, Elokayich Elokai. One God, your God. Jewish girls don't go to places they're not supposed to go. This is in the Medrash. Circuses, theaters. Es Asher Telchie Lech. Wherever you go, that's where I'm going to go. So this is pretty amazing. Ruth gives a speech. This is the only place in the whole Megillah where Ruth says the word God, which is astonishing for a woman who gave up everything in her past to be one with this God. She doesn't say the word Hashem, 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 Hashem. She's not in Chabad. No offense to Chabad. But, she's not going, thank you, Hashem, thank you, Hashem. No! She just says, Elokayich Elokai. That's it. But what a statement of faith, and what a moment to say it. And she continues, Yud Zayin, Ba'asher Tamusi Amos. Wherever you die, I will die. Yikes. V'sham Ekaver. And that's where I'm going to be buried. So Ruth is actually saying something interesting to Naomi. She's saying, you're never going to get remarried, most likely. And Ruth says, I'm a foreigner. I'm a Giores. My lineage is tainted, according to many. For example, a Kohen is not legally allowed to marry a convert. It is one of the things he is restricted from. If you learned this week's Parshas Emor, upcoming, the whole first couple of aliyos are about the restrictions of a Kohen. And a Kohen Gadol especially, who a Kohen can become tameh to upon the death of a loved one. All of that is part of the rules. But she says, I don't care if I get remarried. I will stay with you. I will die there. I'll be buried there, even if I live and die alone. Ko yase Hashem li. Here's again, Hashem, the Cho Yosef. That's a very famous kind of oath that is made in Tanakh. So may God do to me and more. In other words, by God, by everything Hashem will do to me, I swear this. I am making a vow. Ki hamaves yafrid beini uvenech. Only death will separate you and I. And that is a very deep thing. If somebody said that to a romantic partner, that would be one of the great romances of all time. Epic. To say that to your mother-in-law, the Gemara and the Nach are full of mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law. And without being sarcastic, let's just say mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law don't always get along. So for a daughter-in-law to be so strong in her commitment, to be so intense, so loving at the same time, if this brings me, Ko ya'aseh Hashem li b'cho Yosef, that's not a statement of faith, that's a vow. But nevertheless, I want to be in God's country, as they say. I want to be with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is the reaction?
Michael?
Yeah, please, Barbara. Yes.
Were Ruth and Orpah sisters?
I don't think so, but there are some midrashim that say yes.
Oh.
Some imply that they're from the same royal lineage. Others say that they're just from the same larger royal family. If you think about the Middle East, think about the Bin Laden family. No 9/11 reference meant, but the Bin Laden family, he was what, one of 51 kids? I mean, the potentates had wives and children galore, and the intrigue and politics of these empires was always frightening as they murdered each other to get the throne, or once one of them got the throne, murdered everybody else. Eglon was assassinated by a Jew, by Ehud, the Shofet, and yet here is his descendant, if not possibly his actual daughter, saying, there is something so godly about Judaism that I'm not even worried about the past. I'm worried about what the future is going to be with Hashem. What is Naomi's response? Your daughter-in-law is amazing. You called her BT. I mean, that's pretty great, right? When Naomi saw that Rus was misametzes, was determined, amots maybe. I'm sure if Rabbi Shiloni is listening, he can give me specifics, but strength. She's so committed. She's dedicated to coming. So she stopped talking to her. Now, it sounds like she stopped arguing with her, but the literal translation of Vatechdal ledaber eleha means she literally stopped talking to her. Yael Ziegler has a beautiful, amazing take on this. It perhaps Naomi genuinely did not want her daughters-in-law to return to her, maybe motivated by resentment, inconvenience, or embarrassment. This could be supported by Naomi's reaction to Rus's unwavering declaration that she intends to remain with her mother-in-law. Does Naomi embrace Ruth warmly? No. Does she shed tears of gratitude? No. Does she utter exclamations of joy? No. In fact, she remains totally silent in the wake of Ruth's dramatic declaration of loyalty. A declaration, by the way, that the Chazal say is unparalleled in the history of converts to Judaism. Her statement is the unbelievable epitome of what it means to dedicate one's life to God. But she says nothing. Instead of simply ending the conversation as is customary in Sifrei Tanakh, the verse says, and she ceased to speak with her. Chadal. Suggesting a deliberate action on Naomi's part, a termination of communication, even perhaps a stony silence. Can you imagine? I've just dedicated my life to you, you old, angry, bitter woman, in your own words, old, angry, and bitter, and widowed, and lonely, and impoverished, and we're walking on the road barefoot, or maybe with shoes, but with no pack animals or anything. We're trudging down the road. I've given up everything my whole life, and you just are giving me the silent treatment. And Rus doesn't say anything. And then it says, the two of them went until they came to Beis Lechem. Very interesting phrase, Vatelachno shtehem, is exactly parallel to what it says when Avraham and Yitzchak were walking to the Akedah. Vayelchu shnehem yachtav. Vatelachno shteihem. Exactly the same. Same verb. Same kind of word. And yet, by Avraham and Yitzchak, it says yachtav. Together. Here it just says shteihem. The two of them. Almost like they're on opposite sides of the road. Each one, Dr. Ziegler says, she gets very lyrical about this, as they silently trudge along the dusty path from Moab to Beis Lechem. And my first day, I speculated on which path they're taking. I think they went north around the Yam HaMelach and then back down to Beis Lechem. That's probably the shortest distance. But they're trudging. And each one is lost in her own thoughts. Naomi grudgingly accepts the fact of her daughter-in-law's presence. That's harsh. That's hard. And then they come to Beis Lechem. Vayihi kivo ona Beis Lechem. And it came to pass when they came to Beis Lechem, Batehom kol ha'ir alehen. The whole city was in a mahuma, was in an uproar, was astir at their return. Vatomarno hazos Naomi. And they said, is that Naomi? That impoverished, old-looking, aged, bent widow on the road, as opposed to the great Giveret who left in a Lexus, in a Tesla. And here she is trudging into town. Hazos Naomi? Hey, who did they forget to mention? Rus. The townspeople in Beis Lechem do not mention her at all. Maybe they don't even notice her at all. It is possible. I got this from Yael Ziegler also because it was an amazing. I never thought of that. Where's Rus? Why didn't anybody mention Rus? So maybe Rus was unnoticed in the excitement and confusion of Naomi's return. But very possibly the townspeople deliberately ignore Ruth. Maybe motivated by xenophobia. Maybe they pick on Naomi's cue and do not regard her as significant since Naomi is ignoring her.
But they didn't know.
Right. But you
But
see a tall foreigner come striding into town with the former richest woman in town. You're not going to ask who is that? And nobody does.
She's a maid or something.
It's not mentioned.
She's her maid, her helper.
Maybe, but they don't even mention that. But as a maid or a helper, she's not worth noticing either in their eyes, which is why we've seen a couple of times, and we're going to see in Perek Beis, there's a little bit of anti-Moab stereotype or feeling or prejudice. That's the word I'm looking for. There's quite a bit of prejudice on the part of the people of Yehuda because we were told never to mix with Moab, and they took that literally. And Moab was stingy, and Moab is terrible, and Moab is awful, and here comes a Moabite girl. And she dresses different, and she probably looked different if she's ethnically Moabiyah. So this is hard. But it's interesting that the Medrash says, by saying Vatelachno shteihem, it puts them on a parallel level. Bo ure'eh kama chavivim hagerim lifnei hamakom. Look how incredibly dear gerim are to God. Kivan shenasna daita lehizgayer hishva hakasav l'Naomi. When Ruth says, I'm going to be Jewish, she becomes shteihem, one with Naomi, on par with Naomi. She doesn't know much yet. She hasn't been Jewish for very long, if yet at all. It could be the Gerus was still in the future. Maybe Boaz is going to complete that. But either way, it's sort of amazing. Now, not only that, but the problem is it was a big day for Beis Lechem. The Medrash and the Mefarshim say that different things were happening that day. Some say this was the day they were harvesting the barley for the Korban Omer, because we'll see at the end it's the barley harvest. And so that's a huge day when huge crowds gather, and Naomi walks into the middle of town in the middle of a circus and a carnival. Some say that's the day Boaz was marrying off one of his daughters. And so big crowds were there. Or that Boaz's wife died that day. And so there was a big crowd for the Levaya. And either way, Hare zu yotes v'zu nichnasa. The Boaz's first wife was gone, and Naomi is coming in. I'm sorry, Ruth is coming in, and the people are astonished. This is her, in rags, sallow and drawn. So they go to talk to her. Vatomer alehen pasachaf al tikran ali Naomi. And her answer to them is, wow. I mean, wow. We've probably all known people who are bitter, who are angry people. They can be difficult to take in large or small doses. And Naomi doesn't say, oh, it's a pleasure to see you. Because remember, in Beis Lechem, everybody's related. It's a kinship. It's a clan of Yehuda. And she says, don't call me Naomi. Kiren Ali Mara. Call me bitter one. Call me Mara. Which is interesting. She's not complaining and kvetching, saying, feel sorry for me. She's taking responsibility. I am bitter. Ki heimar shakai li ma'od. The Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. Now, that's something one usually doesn't say out loud either. One medrash is really, really beautiful. Compares Naomi to a reluctant cow up for sale. And the seller advertises her as a plowing animal that you can count on. And the buyers ask him, if she's so well trained, then she'll plow. Why does she have whip marks and signs of being beaten and abused over her life? So Naomi comes back without possessions, without family, without health. Now, it's Chaste Hashem that she comes back at all. But she's still suffering, and it's been years since her sons died. But here they are, Chav Beis, Vatashav Naomi. Oh, good, 7:29. We're right on time. Naomi returned to Beis Lechem. Her return also might signify return towards starting her upward move to her status again, to her pleasant good deeds that she had before she ran off with Elimelech to abandon everybody. V'Rus HaMoaviyah Kalasa Ima. And Rus the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, is with her. Notice they still call her HaMoaviyah. The people of Beis Lechem have not accepted her as Jewish. They've accepted her as a Moabiyah, as a stranger in a strange land. Rus is learning the ways of Tzidkos and bringing Naomi happiness and comfort. She doesn't seem to be getting thanked very much yet. Naomi's going to come around, but it takes some doing. Hashava Mistei Moab, who returned from the fields of Moab. V'heima ba'u Beis Lechem. And they came to Beis Lechem b'tchilas Kitzur Sorim, at the beginning of the barley harvest. That's important because we're going to see times are counted in this Megillah because it's all within about 3 to 6 months. So times in this Megillah are counted by the agricultural time of the year. It's the time of the barley harvest. So here's a great woman, royal princess, who gave it all up, overcame her nation's background of stinginess to give herself with love to the welfare and health of Naomi. The Chazal call her a pearl, returning to the Holy Land untouched by the depravity of living in Times Square before. I'm thinking Times Square of the 70s and 80s of my youth. But she's untouched by it. No other Moabim had ever converted because a Moabi man cannot. But a Moabiyah could, but never had before. Rus would be the first. And in fact, not only that, but the halacha was going to be Moabi v'lo Moabiyah would be discovered because of her. Boaz would propagate that halacha far and wide. But it happens at the beginning of the barley harvest, the first harvest of the Omer. Good timing, us. This is a good time for us to be learning this. And of course, with Shavuos coming. But also, according to some, the first harvest after years of famine since Naomi left. So everybody is happy and gleeful, but they're not sure what to make of the formerly rich woman now poor in their midst. They're not sure what to make of this foreigner, her maid, her helper, her servant, who is so dedicated to her well-being and welfare. And we'll see in Perek Beis, who's willing to debase herself to go out and do poor work to try to earn a living for the two of them. Nobody's sure what to make of any of them, and they kind of leave them alone. That's going to change thanks to somebody named Boaz, and we're going to meet him next week. So next week, we're going to start Sunday. If all goes well, and I do cover the psukim we need to, then we don't need Wednesday as a catch-up day, which is lucky, because I just noticed that Wednesday is, of course, raising the stakes at exactly the same time as our shir. So if all goes well and we cover 8 psukim a night, we'll probably be skipping Wednesday so all of you can have steaks and hot dogs and raffle tickets to your heart's desire, including me. Although the Shulam Lemmer musical entertainment I probably can't attend.